I've been building a huge procedurally generated city for my game for almost 3 years now. I wasn't exactly a beginner when I started this project, but even as an experienced developer, I've encountered some problems that I really didn't anticipate. Some of them were technical, as you'd expect, but most weren't, and that's what I'd like to share with you guys today. Maybe it'll be useful to those of you who want to work or already work on a procedural game environment, or you might have some ideas how to overcome them, as all of these issues are ongoing. Or maybe you're just curious. Either way, I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. And by the way, I normally film the background gameplay in VR, but today it'll be flat screen just to give you guys some idea how it looks and plays without VR. So there are the typical challenges you can expect when you start working on procedural environments, such as the algorithm itself, deciding on the software architecture and the technology you're going to use, avoiding repetition and making sure your environment is diverse, as opposed to what is called a procedural oatmeal. Performance is always a concern, whether you're creating the environment on the fly like I do, or pre-generating it and storing the data to be accessed later. All of those things still stand. But I'd like to talk specifically about the issues that I had no idea would come up until I started working on this project. One such challenge is maintaining the overall aesthetic and the feel of the environment. For the record, I'm not recreating any particular city, and realism was never my goal. Instead, I am aiming for a certain vibe for my city that I had no idea would be so difficult to maintain. This is particularly egregious in VR, where you can really feel the atmosphere of the place. Just one element that I add can change the vibe completely. One variable can make the buildings feel too heavy or the streets too artificial, and the problem is, it's impossible to predict how something will affect it until I put it in and generate the whole thing. And it's not even about the style or the geometry or the materials. Of course I try to keep those things cohesive. But even an element that looks great and fitting in the editor can break the atmosphere sometimes. So every time I add a new element or a new rule, I have to do a lot of experimentation with it to make sure it changes the feel of the city for the better and not for the worse. Which takes a lot of time and is pretty subjective, as something like vibe can't be measured and different people find different things appealing. Not to mention that sometimes I can't even tell what it is that's throwing off the vibe, just that something does. This is why your comments on my shorts and videos are important to me. If you guys see something that you think clashes with the city's style or feels out of place or missing, let me know. Can't guarantee I will change it right away, but I welcome any feedback that makes me aware of my blind spots. Another very non-technical challenge I've encountered is that of communicating my vision to others. From close friends and family members to potential investors and collaborators, the procedural nature of the project made it really hard to quickly demonstrate what I'm trying to do without going into technical details, especially in the early stages of development. Normally, when you work on any project, you create a mock-up of the final result to communicate your vision of it. But there's no way to create a mock-up of a procedurally generated city without implementing the whole thing. I mean, sure, I could create a single street manually with some interiors that could be entered, but I don't think it would communicate my vision well enough, as having a vast, explorable cityscape is its integral part. And even that would take a lot of time and effort, which defeats the purpose of a mock-up. And although now I have the environment mostly ready, so I can actually show it like I've been doing in my YouTube videos, I am still having the same problem with the gameplay and the NPCs that I've planned. I've had multiple people tell me that I need to create a vertical slice of the gameplay to demonstrate it. Great idea in theory, but I genuinely can't figure out a way to do it. Let me tell you why. A normal game is usually developed horizontally, meaning you create one area or level with its gameplay elements and then move on to the next. So you can take what is called a vertical slice, a small but fully fleshed out area or level or a single mission with all gameplay elements present, and show it as an example of how the rest of the game will play. A game that relies on systems rather than content is developed vertically, layer by layer. I first implemented the algorithm that creates the city's topology and roads, then the one that creates the buildings, then another one for the interiors, then the items spawning in those interiors, and so on. I cannot take a vertical slice of that without having all the layers implemented. I can't just put one NPC in my city that gives one quest and then say it's a vertical slice. That would be boring and give the wrong impression of the gameplay, because the whole appeal of implementing these systems and algorithms, as opposed to manually placing things, is the possibility of emergent stories and gameplay, and watching different parts of the system interact with each other. For example, when you get a simple fetch quest from a random NPC to go and get an item at a certain address, you don't know what you're going to find there. Maybe the place is an exclusive club and you'll have to bribe the doorman to let you in. Maybe the item's owner is from a rival faction and will offer you to double-cross the original quest giver. Maybe the original quest giver gets arrested in the meantime and you'll have to bust them out of jail to get your reward. Or all of those things at the same time. These are just examples off the top of my head and not the exact things I'm planning, by the way. But you get the point. Interactive procedural systems create opportunities for role-playing your own story that is unique to your playthrough. And communicating this has been the bane of my existence for as long as I've been working on this project. If you have any ideas what a compelling vertical slice would look like for a game like mine, please let me know, I would love to hear them. But of course, by far the greatest challenge of procedural generation is making sure the gameplay is actually engaging. It's not that hard to generate an infinite number of quests to bring 10 jugs of milk or 5 grandfather hammers or whatever. But nobody wants to play those infinite quests if they get bored of one. This is another reason why I've been very careful about adding gameplay to my game, although everybody keeps asking about the gameplay, of course. It would be easy to spawn some zombies here and there and make it a shooter, or spawn some static NPCs that give some generic RPG quests. You can already sorta use weapons in Vuntra City, so it wouldn't take much to make it into a combat-focused game. But there are already so many amazing combat-focused games out there that I am not at all confident in my ability to compete with any of them. And I don't want to waste this unique environment that I made on a mediocre zombie shooter or something. That's why I want my gameplay to be something unique that can only happen in a huge procedural city. I started with the ability to navigate the city without a compass or a minimap, where you have to watch the landmarks and follow the street signs. And by the way, I did add the map marker direction indicator so you can see which way you're facing. I think this will be the basis of the gameplay, finding the city locations by address or by directions, which I will also be adding soon. Then I can add NPCs that actually live in this world and are tied to it, each having a home, a workplace, and maybe a secret. I like how this is done in Shadows of Doubt, where all the information you encounter can be investigated further and linked together. I am aiming for something like that. The quests themselves probably won't be mechanically difficult, and will instead focus on following clues to find the right item, person, or location. As I mentioned before, I want those quests to have a point besides obtaining the reward, so that even though they will be procedural, they will still feel meaningful. That's why there will be several factions the player will be able to work with, each having its own unique set of quests that fit into its lore and a handwritten, overarching story. At least that's the plan. Of course, there's still a lot of work ahead, so this plan may change. But yeah, this is all I wanted to rant about. Thanks for listening if you're still here. Stay creative.